This is Technically Legal, a podcast about legal tech, innovation in the legal industry, and the impact tech is having on the law. I'm Chad Main, the founder of legal services company Percipient, and on today's show, we're talking to disability lawyer turned entrepreneur Jason Heinze about the app he created called ClaimData. It helps their users record pain information that they can then use to support their claims. Jason Heinze originally thought he wanted to be an architect, but he got into disability law after taking over his father-in-law's practice. In that work, to establish his clients' disability claims, he'd have to have them manually enter daily notes into a pain journal that he would then use to support their claims. But because it was a manual process done on paper, he often had difficulty getting his clients to record the entries in the pain journal on a daily basis. So he thought to himself, there's got to be an app for this. But when he looked, he found some that were close, but not exactly what he needed. And that's when he decided to create his own, and ClaimData was founded. By using the app, disability clients can now enter info about their pain and their injuries directly into a web app, and the app also reminds them to enter the information. When it's time to go to court, firms using the app can then print out the reports and provide them to the judges to substantiate their clients' claims. As we will hear, ClaimData is a progressive web app, and that model is used for efficiency and cost effectiveness. It also integrates with case management systems. Jason plans to expand it beyond disability law into personal injury and workers' comp cases. In the end, the main goal of the app is to simplify the evidence-gathering process for attorneys so it's easier for them to prove their disability cases.
So I saw you have a degree in architecture. How does an architect become a lawyer? Was that what you wanted to do, or what happened?
That's a frequent question that I get. I think I kind of wanted to set a record for student debt because I got that architecture degree as a master's, actually. I was working as an architectural designer. My ex-father-in-law was an attorney, a disability attorney. And he's like, man, you're a smart guy. You want to help people and you're never going to make any money as an architect. Why don't you go to law school and come and work with me and take over my disability firm? It was that. And then I had the good fortune to get a nice scholarship for law school when I took the LSAT and applied. And so I was like, well, I can't turn this down. That's what set me off. But I think there's also the idea that I was working at a very elite architecture firm, making houses for people as a third, fourth house, which is, that's nothing against that, but it didn't really fit with my goals of I think, helping people, and the disability law really allowed for that.
So out of college, you go into architecture.
I worked for a handful of years between college and an architecture school.
Anything legal related?
Nothing legal related. I had some friends who moved to New York City. I wanted to be in the city, so I just got a series of jobs that weren't really leading to a career.
So then you start working under your father-in-law's tutelage in disability law, and then at some point you get your own firm. Like, what's the trajectory?
So unfortunately, he passed away about 3 days after my 1L exams.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so my ex-wife is also an attorney. She took over his firm for the time being while I was finishing law school. And then once I finished law school, then I carried the torch on from her. So actually, when I began my disability law career, it was without his tutelage. And so there were some growing pains there. I mean, I was very fortunate to be able to step into a practice.
How big was the firm? Were there other lawyers to help you, or was this all, you learned it all yourself?
Solo, yeah. And I wasn't as good in those days as I am now about, reaching out for help and just saying, hey, I've got a question. And now I'm much better about, taking advantage of the fact that most lawyers, are very collegial, willing to help out a person, particularly a new attorney just getting started.
What year was this?
This was 2015.
Okay. So at least, the internet's been around for 20-ish years, in earnest, 15 at least. I'm sure you did at some point, but it wasn't like when I was started, you had to go to the library and dig out books, to find out what to do next. I mean, at least you're able to go there, but what did you do to teach yourself on disability law? Because it's a really unique, statutory-driven, right, type of law.
Exactly right. And I mean, there certainly weren't any classes on disability law offered in law school. So I eventually learned to write emails, pick up the phone, and ask colleagues for help. I also started to attend conferences held by a group called NOSCR, the National Organization of Social Security Claimants Representatives. That's kind of a mouthful, but they're the largest organization of disability attorneys in the country. They provide really amazing educational content for lawyers at all stages of their careers.
And how many attorneys do you have working for you now?
Right now, it's just me. And in fact, I'm not even practicing law currently. I am devoting myself full time to the software business, ClaimData.
Which was born of a need you had to represent your disability clients. When did you make the switch from law practice to entrepreneur, although solo practitioners, in my mind, are entrepreneurs too, but when did you stop practicing?
Right. Yeah. So from one type of
Yeah.
entrepreneurship to the next, but it essentially stopped practicing toward the end of 2022, beginning of 2023.
Okay. So let's talk about claim data. I'm at a barbecue. We've had this whole conversation. Hey, I was a disability lawyer. I started design a piece of software. That's what I do now. And then I say, well, what is it? What is claim data?
First, I'm glad that we're at a barbecue. I love barbecue. But ClaimData is a pain and symptom and impairment tracking software that attorneys use to develop evidence for their clients' cases. So the simplest formulation is ClaimData creates more evidence so that attorneys can win more cases.
So it aggregates this information you can use as evidence. For those of us not familiar with disability law, other than the very high level, what is that evidence? Explain what is needed to prove a disability matter.
So the heart of a disability claim is medical records. That presents a challenge because a lot of what is in medical records is not directly related to the type of information that lawyers need, right? Medical records aren't intended to be evidence in a disability claim, right? They're intended to help providers diagnose and treat their patients. So what we find is that there's a gap between what's in a client's medical records and then the information about their day-to-day functioning that we need to demonstrate to show that they're not able to work and entitled to the disability benefits.
What specifically is that? Well, before your app, we'll get to your app because we're the genesis of it, but back before you started scratching your own itch, what were you collecting? How were you collecting it?
I like to give the example of a multiple sclerosis client. You can see that you actually do have objective evidence of the condition, right? You can look at the MRI of the brain or of the spine, and you can see the characteristic MS lesions that indicate the presence of multiple sclerosis. But in terms of demonstrating how much pain someone is in as a result of those brain lesions, in terms of demonstrating how much fatigue they experience, the level of cognitive dysfunction they have, there aren't objective tests to prove that. So what often happens, and what happened with most of my clients, is that their doctors believe they were disabled. In fact, their doctors were oftentimes the ones who were recommending that they apply for disability in the first place.
The doctors tell them you shouldn't be working so much because you just can't do it. It's not helping you heal.
Exactly. And in fact, I believe you're disabled. And yet...
But why isn't that sufficient? I mean, granted, there's doctors out there that will cook the books, but I mean, that's a minuscule minority, right? You got an MS diagnosis, the doctor says you're disabled.
Well, the federal government has actually provided a very handy answer to that question in the form of the Code of Federal Regulations, which states that the ultimate opinion as to whether or not someone is disabled is a matter, the term of art is reserved to the Commissioner of Social Security. And furthermore, that someone's opinion, a doctor's opinion, a treating doctor's opinion about that ultimate question of disability, because it's reserved to the commissioner, this is in quotes, inherently neither valuable nor persuasive.
So that somebody in the government's better suited to diagnose a patient than the doctor. I love it. So to prove that there is a disability, they are in pain, they can't work, not just they have MS, what is the kind of stuff you were collecting and how are you collecting it back then?
So in addition to the medical records, it would be, and this is one of the things that I learned, you asked about how did I learn to do the disability practice? Well, at one of the NOSPR seminars, they were talking about best practices for case development. And so they talk about things like symptom journals and symptom calendars and symptom logs. And so that's really where I started down this road was first having my clients do journals. I can tell you about the problems with those. And then
the journal, is
switching them.
it just a spiral bound notebook or what was it?
Exactly right, yeah. And so you can imagine needing to remind clients to do them, and then it's almost worse when they did them because then you've got all these messy handwritten pages that I didn't particularly have time to read. Judges and doctors certainly didn't have time to read it either. So switching from there to more like calendars and logs that were where they're more like checking boxes of all the days that
were
they
they still
had.
physical, paper bound?
Exactly.
So you give these to the judge to prove that your client should receive some disability benefits.
Exactly, because oftentimes what happens, Chad, when people have a chronic condition like this is they're not going to the doctor every time they have a migraine. They're not going to the doctor every time their back pain flares up or every time their fibromyalgia flares up because the doctors can't really provide them any further treatment oftentimes. And so it's very helpful, particularly these episodic conditions, to have information documenting the days between those office visits, the days between those appointments.
When we come back in a couple minutes, Jason tells us how his quest for an app to record his clients' pain data led to him becoming a legal tech entrepreneur. I'm Chad Main, and you're listening to Technically Legal.
So it's 2015 when you start. It's all manual, paper bound. At what point do you say, man, this probably is better suited to keep track of this digitally? When does the idea for the app that you created come to be?
So that was around 2018, 19. Actually, I just thought, well, there's got to be an app for this, right? So I started looking on the App Store, and there are many symptom tracking apps, but they tend to be diagnosis specific. So there's one for Lyme disease, there's one for MS, there's one for migraines, right? And then even the ones that are condition agnostic, right? You can use them for a variety of different conditions. Then there's the matter of how do you collect that data? Are they collecting the right data? Are they collecting data that's useful in the context of a disability claim? What you tend to find is a lot of data that's collected is about subjective reports, right? So my pain is 1 to 10, my fatigue is 1 to 5. Those subjective ratings don't really match up with what disability attorneys are concerned with, which is functioning, objective, day-to-day.
So it's not, I'm in pain 1 to 5. It's, I can only do my job as a 3 when 5 being the best. That's what you guys are concerned about.
A person's pain level 1 to 10, it's a helpful data point, but very, very limited in the sense that nobody knows what an 8 out of 10 really means. It might mean something different to you than to me. Whereas I had to lie down for 2 hours today because my headache was so bad, or I needed help putting away the dishes because my back hurt so much, or I could only sit for 30 minutes at a time due to my legs going
Did you
numb.
try the apps that existed? Did you try them? They just didn't work. And then you said, hey, I'm going to build my own.
I just downloaded about I think a dozen or so of them, maybe 15, and just used them on my own, and found that they tended to collect the wrong information, and that it seemed like it was going to be. And then there's also the matter of reporting. How easy was it to get the reports out of the apps? I don't want to badmouth them all.
Right.
There's one called Migraine Buddy, which is really excellent. But in general, a single tool that would allow me to use with clients with multiple diagnoses and then manage all their information in one place, that's something that I couldn't find.
Okay, I want to get to how you built it and the decision to actually go there. But before we get there, let's explain what your app is, what data it collects, and how it differs from those previous apps we just talked about.
It's a little bit of what I was saying a moment ago, that rather than trying to collect information about someone's subjective state of feeling, right? I am in pain, I am exhausted, my thinking is clouded. It's more recording the level of functional impairment, right? So did I need to take breaks as I was doing my household chores? Did I totally avoid leaving the house to do my errands?
Are these preset questions they need to answer?
Right. So the basic structure of the app is that the key feature of it is a daily survey, questions that I've developed over the last 4 or 5 years. They're tied to the kind of functional information that I know Social Security deems important. And then clients are prompted to do this survey every day. They get a text message reminding them at 6 p.m. to open up the app and then do the survey for that day.
Is this iOS and Android based?
It's actually a progressive web app, so
Okay.
It's not downloaded through the Google Play Store or the App Store. Rather, clients have a link to a website. From there, they can download the app onto their phone so that it.
Oh, interesting. Why was the decision made to do it that way versus doing an app in the App Store or going that route?
It came down to economics, the idea that doing a progressive web app is faster to develop. You don't have to maintain 2 separate products for iOS and then.
That's really interesting too. Coming from a legal tech background too, is maybe you don't need two different apps, in iOS on the Android device. And that, let's say there's a lawyer listed this out there somewhere that there's another way to do it that's more straightforward. So that's interesting that you went that route. But to those ends, when exactly did you decide? When did you go from, these apps really aren't going to work? I'm not going to go back to the paper, but I'm going to create my own app. When did that happen?
Yeah, so it was a gradual process. So it started with, I had those calendars that I mentioned, right? Paper calendars. And I just started to put the results into Excel. So it was kind of this hybrid paper digital model, just so that when I handed the judge a stack of, say, a year's worth of migraine calendars, at the very top was a couple of charts that summarize the entire stack, right? Very, very visual, very easy to see at a glance the type of issues the client was having. And then from there, I started sending clients a daily email survey. And of course, that was started off as a digital format.
What were you using to collect the emails?
So I used Airtable forms. And then I patched together through a...
Big fan of Airtable, by the way. Big fan of Airtable.
Yeah, Airtable's awesome. But I found that their data display, like their visualization capabilities weren't quite as nuanced as I needed. So then I had to port from Airtable through a couple of different apps to a program called Infogram, which gave a lot more customization of the kind of charts and tables that I was able to produce. And so it ended up taking, for each client doing this, it still was a manual process of about an hour to an hour and a half per client using this method that I came up with. And
makes complete sense. You didn't want to Frankenstein anymore. So there's got to be an easier way to do it. So you decided to do it on your own. What was the first step? Did you go talk to a developer? Did you hire a developer to use a dev shop? Or did you do it yourself?
I looked into doing it myself through a low-code app building tool, and just I thought that I could probably get there someday, but wouldn't be able to do it in any kind of reasonable time frame. So I also was very fortunate that a lawyer colleague, when I told him about what I was working on, kindly invested money so that I could...
Oh, nice.
Exactly, so that I could work on this and hire a dev team. So I ended up working with a dev shop that is based in Colombia, a relationship that I found through one of my advisors. And so I worked with them for about right at 18 months to develop the product.
When was it launched in earnest? When did you first start to actually use it in your practice to provide a way of providing evidence to these judges?
So that's an interesting question. So the development process took longer than I imagined.
Which it does. It just does.
Yeah, and actually the involvement in the development process took a lot more time than I anticipated. So I was slowly declining to take on new clients. So I used it with just a few clients of my own, former clients as well, to test it. Since then, in terms of in earnest, after testing it for about 6 months with my own clients, we went to market in late January, February of this year.
And I assume you went to disability colleagues and say, "Hey, I got an app. You check it out." Or what other marketing did you do?
I had been talking with my disability colleagues all the way along, just making sure that I was on the right track here. And so in terms of my marketing, I went to the NOSCR annual conference in May and had a really good response there. Actually, NOSCR selected ClaimData to be part of their official member benefit program, which...
I was going to ask about that. I mean, that'd be a great way to get that out there, right? Did you exhibit at the event?
Exactly, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And then in terms of my marketing efforts, overall, it's been more trying to get the word out on LinkedIn, email marketing. Having been a lawyer before and never had an experience running a business of this kind, I still feel like I have a lot to learn about marketing. So I do appreciate you having me on.
Oh, of course, yeah. No, I love talking to people that they actually go out and build it. And the way you've done it, I think, is really interesting, and it shows that it's achievable. I guarantee there's somebody listening right now that says, "Oh, I could go through these steps." So going back to the marketing, because it's that web-based and not the mobile app-based, are there plans to get it on practice management software like Clio or MyCase, stuff like that? Have you been looking into that?
So right now it's a standalone system, and most firms right now are doing small trials, right? 10 clients, 20 clients, that sort of thing. And so I think the next phase would be thinking in terms of building out integrations with the case management platforms. And so I think it's going to be a matter of When firms are ready to take that next step, that's when we'll, based on which case management software the firm is using, we'll be building out those integrations.
Let's talk about the firms that are using it. It seems like the real burden is on the client to be diligent and enter their information. So what does the lawyer have to do to start this process rolling? Is it literally just entering in the client's phone number? They start getting messages to do this stuff? Or how's that work?
What's been working best for firms is that we will create a co-branded sign-up page. So the law firm co-branded with ClaimData, and there will be an overview of the product really addressed toward the client, getting them to understand that this is a new way and a powerful way for them to really explain what they go through every day, to tell their story through data, to tell their story about what it's really like to struggle with their condition each day. And then clients can sign themselves up from there. So in terms of what's required of the firm, it is sending out clients either via email or text a link to that sign-up page.
The lawyer should just put it as part of their onboarding process, right? When they sign the fee agreement and all that, that should just be one step.
That's what firms are starting to do. Now, other firms are choosing, however, to use it later in the process, because what you have, Chad, with these clients is that they have these chronic conditions, right? That's why they need these disability benefits. And so we found that even a 1 month, but particularly a 2 month or 3 months kind of snapshot of their functioning ends up being representative of what they've been going through for the previous year, and unfortunately what they'll continue to go through. And so a lot of firms are choosing to use it for just a handful of months prior to the disability hearing with the Social Security judge.
How far out is a disability hearing after sign up?
So it depends. It depends on at what point the client comes to the firm, but typically it's going to be anywhere from I'd say 6 to 12 months.
So that makes sense because it's really crucial correct me if I'm wrong, if you sign somebody up in January and the hearing's in December, is the panel or the judge, I guess it's judge, going to be more concerned about the person's health at that point in December, or are they going to be concerned early on?
So with these disability claims, there's kind of two questions. It's like, are you disabled or not? And then the other question, if you are, is when did you become disabled?
Right.
So they are looking retrospectively. And so I think, and this is something that kind of keeps me up at night, is making the survey, the daily survey, making it comprehensive enough and yet making it easy enough.
Right. It's got to be easy, right? People don't want to do it.
Exactly. And because what we're dealing with are people who are not at their best, right? They're suffering with these conditions. They don't feel well. And so we've taken a lot of effort, taken a lot of pains to make it as easy as possible for them and to provide as much encouragement as we can in an automated way through the way they interact with the app, the feedback it gives them for completing it, that sort of thing.
I know it's built for disability, but why couldn't this be used for a personal injury client? Because you got to go to court and prove that injury impacted your life.
Our go-to-market strategy is start in disability because that's the area of law that I know, and the product is optimized for that now. The product as it is would provide a ton of value for personal injury firms currently. I think what's interesting about the personal injury context is that clients in the disability context, you don't get special damages or you don't get compensation for your degree of pain. It really comes down to your degree of impairment, your degree of dysfunction. Whereas with personal injury, there is an opportunity for compensation for those non-economic damages. So having more record of that is going to be valuable for personal injury attorneys. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that. That's definitely where we're headed.
Yeah, that's cool. Just for you, where you're headed, what's on the roadmap? I mean, you get it out there. You obviously getting people, getting the word out, getting customers, getting usage is the imminent roadmap. But what's the next feature? What's on the whiteboard?
So it's expanding from the Social Security disability context, that practice area, to there's going to be Veterans Affairs, Veterans Disability application there. One of our Social Security attorneys has a really big workers' comp practice. So we're actually doing a pilot of ClaimData with their workers' comp clients. So that's exciting. There's the personal injury that we just mentioned. And then I think in terms of more like, rather than just expanding to other practice areas, in terms of the technological piece, we haven't mentioned those two letters, AI yet.
Yeah.
But of course we have to. So I think it's really exciting in terms of what I was just saying about making it comprehensive and yet easy for clients to do. To the extent that a client could chat with some sort of AI rather than having to interact with the screen and pressing buttons. That seems very promising. And then on the reporting end,
I was going to say the reporting, right? Because then the AI can come in and analyze what would take a human many hours to do, right?
exactly. So we can give the AI a really robust set of data and then create a model that would have the AI summarize that data as if they were a functional capacity evaluator or a psychologist or a vocational rehabilitation specialist.
Is there a format that the court or the administrative judge requires to provide this information?
So Social Security accepts data or accepts evidence primarily as PDFs. So that was one of the big challenges when I was doing it myself, was generating those PDFs. There are lots of tools out there to create web dashboards. Creating PDFs is a much thornier technical problem.
Right. Well, cool, Jason. I appreciate your time. If people want to get a hold of you, or more importantly, learn about ClaimData, where do you want to send them?
So the web address is getclaimdata.com, G-E-T, claimdata.com. My email is jason@getclaimdata.com. You can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Okay, that's a wrap for today's episode. As always, we really appreciate you listening. If you want to subscribe, you can find us on most major podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, etc. Also, if you like us enough, I hope you leave us a favorable review. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, this has been Technically Legal.